Hello, my fellow comic book collectors. This is going to be part two of the previous video that I did, which is the unboxing video. I recently unboxed a few comics that were all from Seduction of the Innocent. So this is the book, Seduction of the Innocent. I bookmarked where each of these four books make their appearance in this book, and I'm going to read you the sections that relate to them, so you can get a sense of why they were included in this book and potentially the impact they have on young children. So, if children are watching, maybe if they see these books, they will have their minds corrupted. I don't know, but we'll see. So I'm going to show you the first one. First one is a Rula, a comic that I really like. I really actually really enjoyed just the whole comic. I think it's awesome. So Rula. So why is she in the Seduction of the Innocent? Well, I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to read you why, I should say. So she makes her appearance on page 23, 22 and 23. So one of the things that he didn't like about a lot of these books is they claim to be educational. So he wrote the following: the educational page, skipped by many children, pointed with pride by the publishers and approved, but not sufficiently scrutinized by parents and teachers, could conceivably contain under stimulation, a counter stimulant to the violence of the stories, but often it gives some historical rationalization of it. For instance, in the Jungle comic book, Rula, that this is referring to Rula, in the Jungle comic book, what does the educational page show? This one page entitled The First Americans, a young girl in modern evening dress, her wrists chained to a tall, upholstered structure so that she leans backward in a recumbent position, revealing the full length of her legs with a definite erotic suggestion, is being menaced with a big knife held by a gruesome masked figure who says the following: at harvest and planting time, they would cut out the heart of a living victim. In other words, the education to sadism permeating this whole book is here fortified in the guise of history. So that's what he basically he interpreted that this book was basically, reinterpreting history in a way to teach sadism to young children. So I think that's a very interesting way of interpreting that situation. Now, personally, maybe it kind of shows that whole erotic thing of bondage and so forth. But I don't know how kids would interpret it. I think it's kind of interesting the way he makes the interpretation of the comic. So that's the first one. The next one is this one, Murder Incorporated. Okay, number 8. Murder Incorporated, number 8. So another book that was mentioned in Seduction of the Innocent, and it was mentioned on page 160. So I got to flip here. Got all my little bookmarks. So on page 160, it says why this book was mentioned. And it's referring to another thing that he found was a lot of these comics were teaching kids how to be criminals. And in this book, he gives the example that the one story gives a price list for hurting people in the protection racket. Eyes blackened, $4. Arm or leg broken, $10. Whole job, 100 up. Okay, so it's teaching kids the pricing involved with how to how to extort money, or how to racketeer. So it's kind of interesting how he interprets this. He sees these comics as educational, that they're teaching crime to kids. So they're teaching kids how to be juvenile delinquents. So I think that's kind of an interesting take on this. So that's the reference to that comic and Murder Incorporated. So the next one is Justice Traps the Guilty, number 13. So what's so harmful about this book? Well, I'm going to tell you. This one is mentioned on page 110. So flip back here. I got another bookmark. Okay, so in this book, in the comic book, an authorized by the Association of Comics Magazine Publishers, this lesson is driven home. A young girl is being initiated as a Confederate into the slot machine protection racket. She sees how her friends how her friend beats up an old man and knocks off his glasses, etc. At first, she does not like it, but later, after she has seen such brutal treatment repeated as routine, in the racket, she says, one gets accustomed to the brutality after a while. That is one instance where I agree with the comic book character. Okay? So basically, he's saying that because kids are seeing these comics over and over and over again, that they're getting used to brutality and crime, and therefore it seems like second nature to them. It's not like a big deal. So therefore, why wouldn't they do it, right? So it's sort of like what we hear nowadays with video games. Oh, video games are destroying kids' minds. They're going to make them go around shooting people and doing horrible things. So it's the same kind of idea that these comics from the 40s and 50s were corrupting young kids' minds because they were desensitizing them to the brutality of the crimes that they were seeing in the comics. So I think that's kind of interesting. So he actually agrees with the comic, and that's why it made the reference. So I thought that was quite interesting. The next one that I did an unboxing of was this one, Crime Clinic number 3. So it's a nice painted cover. It has one of those wraparound covers, actually. It's quite nice. It's kind of painted on both sides. Not really wraparound, but kind of a cool cover. So yeah, Crime Clinic number 3. So why is this in here? So this Crime Clinic was mentioned on page 18. I'll read you the reference. Okay. Okay, I have to read a little bit. Okay. It shows a well-dressed boy. They proceed to threaten this boy. His hands over his money to them. He hands over his money to them. But that does not satisfy the tough teacher. Oh, sorry, I should read a little bit further. There's actually a little bit more here about it. Okay, so I'll read from the beginning on this one. Sorry about that. Okay, so one of the things that he kind of talks about, and I had to read a little bit to sort of get a good summary here, is that instead of like hero comics, and this is kind of really important in a way because one of the transitions that happened between the Golden Age and the Silver Age was in the Golden Age, they actually had comics on everything. Like they had crime ones, they had murder ones, they had jungle comics, they had hero comics, but hero comics were a very small group. Okay, a lot of crime. There was a lot of crime comics. There was a lot of horror, and one of the comments that he makes was that that people, instead of idolizing true heroes like Superman or Batman or some kind of hero, they are, because they're reading these crime books, they're actually idolizing the criminals. Okay, and so he makes reference to this book as setting up that situation, that they're going to idolize the criminals rather than heroes. And this played very big into the Silver Age because all of a sudden you get the growth of the whole superhero comic genre, because before that it was like a small part of the comic industry, but afterwards pretty much most publishers focused on just producing superhero comics. So it was a very big shift that happened, and this is kind of the reason why. um, so in the beginning of this comic book story, in a hood which a hood teaches two little boys, if the kids want to learn to be like me, you got to be tough. Never give uh, the other guy even a break. He shows them a well dressed boy. They proceed to threaten this boy with his hands over his money, and he hands his money over to them. But that does not satisfy the tough teacher. He bangs their heads together and exclaims, "You always have to slug them. Remember that." This is the elementary lesson of crime comics. Okay, so basically teaching kids how to be criminals and giving them a sense that the criminals are kind of like the heroes. So that's kind of a major reference. Now the last one that I got in the unboxing was this one, Famous Crimes, number 7. Okay, and this one actually has maybe the most interesting of all the comics here, the reference, and I'm going to read it to you. It's quite interesting. I was reading it earlier. So, so this one, basically, he recounts a story where he's like, sitting next to a kid reading a comic. Okay, so once in a waiting room of a clinic, I saw a little boy crouched over a comic book, oblivious to everything around him. In passing, I could see the title of the story he was reading. Big capitals spelled out Tarzan. Surely, I thought, the adventures of Tarzan are harmless enough for juveniles of any age. But I was misled, as many parents no doubt are. When I looked at this comic later, I found on the inside cover, a picture of a man tied up in an agonizing position, a man found dead in a Dallas park, his hands tied behind him and 2 bullets in his worthless carcass. Another man shot in the back as he is thrown out of a car. "Get out, you stinking rat," said the and more of the same. Tarzan was not the whole title of the story. I had seen the boy in the waiting room reading. There was a subtitle, "The Wyoming Killer," and 2 other headings, from police files and a true crime story. The story was not about Tarzan, but a hero who robbed a bank and shot 5 men to death. Okay, so again, he basically interprets it like that criminals are being made into heroes because, by telling these crime stories and making it seem very cool, that it makes it seem cool to kids, and they're going to emulate it. They're going to want to be their heroes, right? They're going to want to be the criminal. And the way he says that at the very end, that, a hero who robbed a bank and killed 5 men. So instead of saying a criminal, that, and really these books were not trying to do that. They weren't trying to like heroize these criminals. In a way, they were trying to show how the brutality of these guys, and how justice ends up prevailing over them. But Wortham, who wrote The Seduction of the Innocent, interpreted it the other way. He saw that these books were glorifying criminal activities, and that was seducing the minds of kids. And this is why the seduction of the innocent, that is seducing them to go to the dark side. Jedi reference. So he poses a really interesting story. It's a very interesting book. You can find it on online in a PDF format. You don't have to buy the original copy like I did, but it's a very interesting read because it gives you a sense of what they were thinking when they had this whole trial against the comic book industry, and that whole attitude that they had about comics and how it really changed over like a very short amount of time, from comics just being a regular thing that everybody read to all of a sudden moving towards this silver age where it was just hero stories and very little variety, and all of a sudden it became less accessible to most people. Most people didn't really find it as interesting. It was more focused towards younger audience. So that was kind of the sad thing that happened between the transition of the golden and the silver ages. So yeah, I love this stuff. I love this history. So I hope you do too. And I recommend you check out my other videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.